Azure Data Factory, a nice tool where you can build a pipeline, ETL pipeline, uh, which can consist of so many functions, ready-made functions, like copy data. Uh, a simple example where you can select a source data set, and at the target you can have a target data set, and then you can simply say copy my data from source dataset to target dataset. That's the simplest form of a function, just for the understanding. But there are plenty different other services available. Data Explorer, Azure Functions you can attach. You can do batch service, data brick, data lake analysis, general, HD Insight, uh, machine learning, stuff like that. So this pipeline portion, or whatever you do design here in the designer UI, dataset, data flow, these are actually different components which end user or developer can design. But the challenge is, how do you collaborate on this UI, or in this designing part, and then deploy your pipeline to other environments. So if this is your dev, you would like to deploy whatever you do after the collaboration, you know, to upper environments like QA, testing, and the prod. Um, so if we had basically you want to create a pipeline to deploy a pipeline. So Data Factory itself provide you with a pipeline, and you need automation pipeline to deploy the same. You can't actually have this UI access for your prod or UAT where you go and then again, because each of these components will have few things like for this particular functions to function, you need a data set. Now set is actually linked with services. That services is a blob storage, right? So that blob storage, already created that blob storage somewhere. If you go to uh, this resource itself, uh, this is the prod. Let me go to the uh, dev environment. So uh, this particular data set actually connected to blob storage, right? Now, that blob storage itself a relatively static resource or asset which pipeline do not provision. Pipeline provision uh, different activities. Pipeline let you provision dataset. Pipeline let you do data flow, template, and stuff like that. It also let you choose your own integration environment, integration runtime, basically. So if any of your processes require backend computing support, you can have self-hosted, Azure hosted, or Azure SSIS. So these are the things which your active data Azure Data Factory will take care. But the associated static resources means if you want to connect this with blob storage, Azure Functions, Data Brick, all these services or all these resources needs to be exists already, right? So like for this one, this data set is connected to a particular storage in my dev environment, which is basically represented by a resource group. I already have this storage created. This and in fact, the data factory itself is actually a Azure asset or Azure resource. So data factory can't create itself. So these other associated linked services basically needs to be provisioned in a different pipeline. So you have a pipeline, data factory pipeline, which take care of pipeline, linked services, data sets, stuff like that. You also need another pipeline which let you deploy this infrastructure itself, storage, data lake, and stuff like that. So to give you and for the collaboration, it also needs a backend repository where you can keep all your words involved to make uh, complete automation. Let's consider this picture. It's not a very well drawn picture, but it will do. So basically, Data Factory will let a developer design a pipeline through UI. Now, when you have a UI, you can actually attach the Data Factory with a backend repo. In this case, GitHub is the only choice of. There is another one which is like Microsoft maintained Git itself, repo itself. But GitHub is the choice of repo for this particular use case, and there is not much options. You can't actually have anything else at this particular moment. Now, you do have a data factory. That data factory let you design a pipeline which consists of linked services, linked link and linked services. So those are like data bricks, storage, lake, as I just showed you. Um, Now, this these are actually this storage, lake, brick, then data factory itself uh, form the infrastructure part of your entire solution. Now, the pipeline artifacts and the link services, as well as the trigger, datasets, everything consist or form or the from the part of your data factory or the application portion of the solution. So there is application portion of the solution and there are infra portion of the solution. Now, so when you start working as an individual developer, certainly you can have GitHub as your backend repo, and that will require a working or dev branch where Data Factory will store all the working artifacts, basically combination of few JSON files. So you do collaboration, you create that pipeline that will store all the artifacts in your uh, dev branch. Now the dev branch also need infrastructure, just so infrastructure ready. If you are using a storage, then that storage needs to be ready. If you're using data lake, that needs to be ready for you. So that's why you need infra directory for this particular design, but this design can be evaluated or it can be extend in different fashion. Just for the sake of this particular demo, let's say you have a infra directory in the working branch that consists of terraform script which will create this infrastructure for you, right? If you do any change in this infra branch, that will start a workflow in infra workflow, and that will execute the terraform and create all these relatively static resources for you, as well as the data factory itself. Now, uh, uh, this workflow is a very interesting thing, GitHub Actions or workflow, which is relatively not that much mature, but still it does its job. And I'm really surprised in the first few days when I was working with this action and workflow. It's really very simple and easy. So in this particular workflow, infra workflow, what you can do, you can let your Terraform cloud and workspace to take care of the Terraform state. Basically, you are using Terraform Cloud to store the Terraform state and to do the executions. So what GitHub Action will do, GitHub Actions will invoke container that will act as client to this Terraform Cloud. So in Terraform Cloud, you need to have a token created. That access token will let this infra workflow in the GitHub action to to run the Terraform script which you have stored in your infra directory to get executed. So executions will happen in Terraform Cloud, but you will see the output in your GitHub action result screen, and then the infrastructure will get created. Now, once it's done, you have your dev version of the data factory. You can use your UI. You are allowed to do uh, a design in the UI itself, or you can in fact script your entire setup in your infra code. That is also possible. Now once it's done, once your collaboration is done in working directory, Data Factory will have options to save and publish. Now, when you do save and publish, that will look for a branch which you already configured as publish branch. Now, that publish branch can be test branch, a QA branch, or even a production branch. But the thing is that you have options only to choose one branch at a time when you do deploy. So, if you publish whatever you worked on, Data Factory will look for the working artifacts. It will change or do little bit of magic there, and then it will give you published artifacts, which again you are storing. So in your test QA or prod branch also, you will have two, uh, at least for this particular use case, two directory. One directory is for the infrastructure of the prod, because your linked services or the relatively static assets also needs to get created in your production environment also. So the brick, storage, lake, whatever you do, and the data factory itself, definitely data factory name needs to be globally unique. So whatever name you are using in your dev, that can't be used in your production. So all this infra needs to be created in your production environment or QA or test. And then when you publish your data factory to any of the branch, QA or prod, this ARM template will get generated on the fly based on whatever working artifacts you have in your collaboration branch. So again, another Terraform run will happen. Same thing, same infra pipeline will get invoked. This time it would be for the particular branch or the environment you are making the deployment. And then your ARM artifacts also will get deployed to a through a GitHub workflow. So one workflow for the infrastructure, another workflow just to deploy data factory itself. So this is the way, this is the model can be followed. Now there are few other things which needs to be understood. Secrets. So to deploy to Azure, in this case the infrastructure provider is Azure, you need authentication credentials. So those secrets needs to be stored in GitHub. Now your data factory also need few parameter to be changed, values to be changed in different environment, QA, prod, or dev, right? So those values related to the application portion of the solution can be stored in Azure Key Vault, or you can even keep that in GitHub secret itself. Now, when you are running your infrastructure, Terraform workspace also needs to get authenticated against Azure cloud. So for that, whatever environment variable you need, that also needs to get stored here. So this is the part we have to be very careful so that our secrets are not scattered around different silos, right? So we have options like key vault. You can even keep your secrets in GitHub. Some of your secrets you have to store in Terraform workspace if you use that. If you don't use it, you can even use Azure storage as your Terraform state the backend. So we need to be a little bit careful that how we are designing it. So for the thumb rule, all the infra related login informations which require you to log in against the infrastructure, that can be stored or among this Terraform workspace as well as in the GitHub. But all the data factory or the application related parameters and values, I would prefer rather storing in GitHub itself. It should be coming from either HashiCorp, Vault, or Azure Key Vault. But for the sake of this particular demo, I'm keeping everything in the GitHub. But I'll show you that how you can even fetch values from Key Vault. So now this is almost the idea that this is the way it will work. And let's see that how it's actually functioning. One more thing. So everything depends on a service principle. So if you want to deploy um, um, anything, any resource to Azure resource group or in a subscription or stuff like that, you need a service principle to be created. That service principle basically give you scoped access. So let's say QA and prod are into different resource group, then you need a service principal which has access to your dev environment where you are designing through UI, access to your QA environment, access to your prod environment, so that when you deploy, you have the right to deploy. Otherwise, it will fail. So that service principle needs to be created, and then that service principle give you some secrets that needs to be stored in GitHub as well as in Terraform, so that they can get authenticate themselves, and then they can start their own workflows. Approach the branching strategy in the GitHub itself. So let's say you have like at least minimum two branch. One is your dev branch or the working branch. Uh, in the working branch, as I said, you have one infrastructure directory where you keep your Terraform script. Now, for the dev, this is basically going to create your dev infrastructure for the data factory. Now, this is this particular portion describe that how you want to keep your state. I'm saying that I need to keep my state in the Terraform cloud, and this is my workspace. Just to show you how it looks like. Uh, Again, you also need to create a token. That token for the workspace will give you access from GitHub. So GitHub uh, CLI, you want to connect to this workspace so that your Terraform can run and you can see all the output in your GitHub workflow result screen, right? So how looks like if you're not familiar to this one, you have this two workspace created: ADF automation prod. ADF automation basically the dev one, um, and you have all these variable. These are the output of JSON output. All this information you can get from the JSON output while you are creating your service principal: client ID, secret, subscription ID, tenant ID. If you have already worked with Azure, you know these are the things you need to run your Terraform script. Now, if I go back again, so once it is done, it's very simple that I'm creating a storage. I'm creating storage container, a source container, and a target container, just to copy a file from source to target. Then I'm creating a data factory, as well as I am assigning account a GitHub account, a branch name. This is the working directory, Git URL, and the repository name, basically where I have all my, artifacts or all my application files stored. And then this is the root folder path where you want your working directory under your working branch. This is the directory where all the working artifacts will be stored by the data factory. Now, I went ahead and I created the blob storage as well as I linked that blob storage. So this storage, I'm creating a link out here. Then I'm creating a data set. So this data set pipeline and the linked services, these are something you should be or you could be creating uh, with the UI. But once you know these are the things you need and this is the way you need them, you can anyway script them if it is possible. Like terraform is still evolving, there are so much advanced stuff available in data factory, maybe everything not possible to be scripted. So as much as you can do it in the dev. And remember, only in the dev you have access to the UI, right? You can't access UI or designing tools in your upper environment, right? Prod or QA. So, yep. Now, if I just go back to my workflow, this workflow, so basically saying that if any changes happen to the dev branch, now remember this working branch always get artifact from the data factory itself. But I do not want any workflow to be triggered if data factory pushing any JSON artifacts. I want only this Terraform path, any change to this Terraform directory to trigger a Terraform run in the Terraform workspace itself to create the dev environment, right? So uh, 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 you need a event which is push. You need a particular filter which is the branch and path. Then you need jobs. That jobs basically will have steps. So I'm saying that hey, I need latest Ubuntu, and then check out all the files you have, all the Terraform script you have, then this API token actually credentials giving authentications against the workspace, Terraform workspace. Then it's a usual Terraform init, plan, status, and finally apply, right? Now the same way, if I just move back to the production branch, here things can get complicated. You have so the same thing, you also need to create all the relatively static asset or resources in your production branch too. In this case I do have a separate workspace, and then I'm creating a key vault. Why? Because as I said, all the application or the data factory related parameters values for different environment can be stored as a secret in Azure Key Vault. Like for the production, the storage connection string, you can have a secret created and you can store the storage primary here, like the connection string in the key vault. Later, you can access it to create your deploy your application, right? So, and I'm not creating anything related to the pipeline like dataset, like the data flow, triggers, or anything. But Data Factory itself is a resource which needs to be created. But I'm not creating anything to configure the pipeline for my production. That's not the goal. That design you do in the designer itself, right? You do the design here, you linked all these services, you do whatever you want, and then that needs to be deployed automatically to the production environment. So if I go to, So once you deploy this Terraform script in the dev, you'll automatically have this GitHub configured, right? And how these things work. So basically, you would see that in your connections, you have this Git already configured, already connected, right? Now, by default, this publish branch will say ADF publish to ADF underscore publish. Basically, that's the default, but you can always edit and change it. You will see all the branches available for that particular repository, and you can change it. Now, once you have it, you can actually once you have a backend repo, you can't actually design anything in the data factory mode. So whatever you do, ADF dev or the working branch will have all the JSON files already imported. Already imported to that. So if you go here, you will see you have options import existing data factory resource to the repository. That's for the first time. But later on, the moment you do any changes, like simply changing this text will actually let you save all and then publish. This publish will publish everything. This publish will publish everything to the working branch. Now there is a twist there. It's not a twist. It's a if I go here, you'd see uh, yes. So now the path which been configured root folder ADF artifacts, right? So everything you do that will get stored under ADF artifacts, dataset, factory, link services, pipeline. Basically everything is a big JSON file. That's it. Now, one thing we have to remember that in the production, when you do a publish after your collaboration ends, you can do a publish. This publish basically based on the configuration going to publish in ADF prod production branch. This publish actually publish all your artifacts inside a directory or path name ADF test amartya dev. Now this is actually exactly same as the data factory name here, right? So that is something you need to know. So when you are publishing from a branch, publishing to a branch, all the artifacts going to be saved under a path or directory with the name of the data factory itself. So even if it is prod branch, you would see that all your artifacts saved with the name of your dev data factory, development and working data factory. Now, that's why if I just go to the workflow of the productions, you would understand that how. So once you publish it, uh, another workflow will invoke through GitHub action, right? So before that, even before that application part, you have to have that static assets to be deployed, right? So for that, you have a prod infra deploy workflow, which says deploy to the prod infrastructure, deploy prod infrastructure, same thing. It's actually doing the same thing. It's running the Terraform run to deploy everything you have for your production infra. And then once you publish from the dev data factory, that will actually start deploy your application portion of the solution. And that basically saying that, hey, if any changes happen to this prod branch to the path, basically publish will publish everything in the directory with the name of the data factory in the working branch. uh, um, so if anything change in this particular path, then do the same thing, do Azure logins with Azure credentials, try to fetch all the secrets from the key vault. These are different use and step. and then finally deploy. Now remember that when you are deploying it for the productions, data factory name or the connection string are different, right? So you can supply this parameter in this pattern, or you can fetch all these informations from the key vault itself. So if you are using key vault, this is the way you can get the secret. This is the name of the secret, right? Now the ID of this particular step is my get secret action. Now in a different step, you can say step ID of the earlier step, then output, and the name of the secret, right? So you can access, but I'm not doing it. Everything I'm getting all the secrets. It's already stored in the GitHub itself. So just to let you know, all the secrets are here. You can store it here. Azure credentials. That's basically the JSON output of the service principal you have created for the resource groups you have. Then this storage connection, subscription ID, stuff like that, API token, tenant ID, stuff like that. So, so now dev, you see there is nothing, right? So let's have some changes to the Terraform script for the dev environment to be created. That will create a change and that will invoke a workflow. I simply do some changes in the Terraform and commit. Okay, now anytime I should expect a workflow start to be started. Um, yeah. So Terraform workspace also reflect the same changes. We'll go to the dev environment and see like how everything's provisioned. Okay, yeah, storage as well as the data factory, uh, all the containers and everything been provisioned. We'll go to the UI designer, and I should expect that the GitHub has already been configured, which it is. By default, publish branch ADF publish. That's what comes default, but you can change it. Then if I go to the pipeline, I don't see anything, right? Because GitHub selected as the backend. But if I select to the data factory board, I see pipeline as well as the dataset which Terraform script already created. It's all been connected to the storage. uh, Connection is successful, so everything working fine, this function, and believe me, it will actually do what it is supposed to do, like copying data from source to destination. But that's a trivial thing here. So if you just edit and change the publish branch to any of the branch, you are ready to publish to that particular branch whatever changes you do in the UI. If I apply, before that I'll import existing data factory resources to the collaboration branch, and then I'll apply. But that publish not actually gonna invoke workflow in the dev branch, because dev branch workflow only to create the infrastructure. There is no applications being deployed, going to be deployed in the dev branch through the ARM template, right? That's the way Terraform script been configured, filtered with a directory path. Now we'll change something in the production infrastructure code just to simulate a change so that it triggers a workflow to deploy the static assets or resources to the production environment. And then let's do a commit. I should expect our workflow to kick off any moment soon. Yes, and it will start deploy infrastructure to the prod. Now almost it's done. It's complete. Once it's done, I should get the same result in my production environment too. Yes, a key vault as well as the storage. So what I'll do, I'll grab the storage connection string. And I'll update my secret here in the GitHub. And then I'll do some changes in my workflow file. I need a environment variable to be declared for the storage connection. And then I need to make the same change to um, override my parameter values. So I will just override the connection string, factory name, uh, specific to the production environment. And then I'll save it. So now I'm in my Dev UI, ADF UI, and I'll do certain changes. So at first I'll see like my connection string connected to the Dev. Yep, and I do simple change to the name of the copy data function. Uh, then I'll save it, publish. It, gathering my changes from the collaboration branch, then it is publishing the same, and I should go to the action section to see application deployment workflow should get kicked off any moment now. Yep. Now as this job completes, I should go to the production, and if I refresh, all the changes from the dev should reflect here, all the pipeline data set with the same name, stuff like that. And yep. So now I have completely automated uh, Active Directory, sorry, Azure Data Factory pipeline